we go.
Here we go. Hi and welcome. My name is Brenda Reese. I am a relationship mentor and I'm also a forgiveness coach. And those two are handy to work together because in all relationships, who does not need for some forgiveness? And I love coming to you on these Thursday mornings because we have questions from people that are watching and clients that really are struggling with situations and people, and they want some guidance. So, coming together with you, with my fabulous colleague, Kim, is really something that we really like to do. And hopefully, you think so too. So, Kim, what do we have for today?
Yeah, so the question today did come in from somebody, but ironically, thanks for Kim's Thursday therapy sessions. Grateful for those. But ironically, it is something that I personally have struggled with as well. So the question came in is how do I navigate or how do I set boundaries with family members who maybe don't respect them, don't understand them? And it was interesting because as I was kind of thinking that through and just in chatting with you a little bit about what came to my mind is I oftentimes feel like with family members, we're pretty quick to kind of like push them away and say, oh, you're not respecting my boundary, or we had a situation, we're having a conflict, valid or not, right? And so we're pretty quickly to push them away. I feel like sometimes we even work harder on relationships outside of the family dynamic. We'll work harder to save a friendship, we'll work harder to save a colleague working environment than sometimes we do with the family. And so that kind of brought up some interesting thoughts for me about how do we let our protection thing down a tiny bit to be able to start to set those boundaries with family members in a healthy way without necessarily sabotaging the relationship, if that's appropriate, right? Like there's so many layers within that. Sometimes it's not appropriate to try to save the relationship. So maybe we can just kind of start with how do we start to navigate that family dynamic and setting boundaries in relationships where it's appropriate to try to really save those and grow in those relationships.
This is good. And I love having these therapy sessions with you because family is, and I'm going to use this word, it can be complicated because of the emotional entanglement.
Yeah.
And because, like you said, the words family dynamics, we have roles in family that we play. We grew up playing certain roles, whether we're the peacekeeper or the good child, whoever that is. And what happens a lot of times is the parent or family expects us, excuse me, they expect us to play those roles.
Right.
And they also expect us to go with, what do I want to say? They also try to control how we show up in life, what we're going to
Yep.
do and be. And that is, we get to a point where we're like going, wait a second, this doesn't feel right.
Right.
The other piece of this is also that, psychologically, we are afraid to set boundaries with family. We are
Mhm.
afraid to, like, we will set a harder boundary with somebody else than we will with our family because really underneath it psychologically it's kind of a strange thing, but we're afraid they won't love us. It goes back to that tribal, right? That first and second chakra kind of thing. We're
Mhm.
afraid to kind of speak up. And also it depends upon the dynamic of um I'm going to say whether somebody's been harsh or mean. I've had several clients that it wasn't even the parents that were that way, it was siblings,
Right.
right? And they grow up with this really love-hate relationship with these siblings because they were so controlling or they were so demeaning,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so understanding first kind of what is really important in any kind of setting, and especially with family, is understanding, what do I want here?
Yeah.
What is it that I want to create? Do I want a relationship? Because honestly, really, do you want a relationship with some of these family members? Would you choose them on the street? Honestly.
Right, and maybe that goes to why we throw it away. I feel like sometimes it's thrown away really, really
Yeah.
quickly when it's a family member, but maybe it's because we know that there is that level of like assumed love, or you can't get rid of me because we're blood's thicker than water, right?
Right.
I have mixed feelings on that statement, but I feel like there's a safety in that, a tiny bit. But also I feel like wouldn't it be interesting if we figured out a way to start to work on those relationships, maybe as hard as we would a relationship outside of that?
And this is a good point because we're quick to kind of brush off because we do have that pseudo, they're going to love me anyway. That's that psychological part,
Right.
which is fascinating to me, on how we have that. And also, we learn so much from our family.
Yeah.
We learn, whether we can phrase it as good or bad, we can judge it that way. Whatever it is, family plays a really significant role in how we interact with people, how we interact with ourselves. We model what we see and experience. And a lot of that isn't so fun, but some of it is. So we learn how to love. We learn how to attach or detach in relationships. We learn how whether we communicate or not. We learn all these things from our family. It plays a huge role for us. And so when we look at that, we can really see what we carry forward from that, understanding our role in the family dynamic, because more than likely we are taking that role with us into adulthood, right? And so then what we do is, even with family or not, but we can start, family is a beautiful place for learning and growth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
seriously. And you don't have to be in relationship with the family to learn from it,
Or
right? But
even
going back,
reflecting back, right? When you reflect back, it's funny you said something, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's really interesting when you said, that's where we learn everything. So that's really interesting because it's almost like going back and trying to correct your teacher,
yeah,
right?
that's perfect. Oh my
That
gosh,
would
that is, yeah,
that would be difficult, right? And so
very,
maybe that's why we sometimes do walk away a little quicker, because we're like, I can't tell the teacher they were wrong,
right.
or what the teacher did doesn't feel right to me anymore. How do I fix that? That makes sense to me as to why that would be so hard to try to go back into that relationship and start to play around, practice
Yes.
setting boundaries, saying, look, I know we've always done it this way, but it
Mhm.
doesn't feel okay to me anymore. How do we navigate that? Like,
Yes.
how do we do that, Miss Brenda?
Well, so this is where we got to get real with ourselves. And again, going back to what I said is like, what do you really want here? Because some people feel that they cannot have the relationship they want to have with family members.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it could be true, it might not be true. The only way to find out is to find out. So, in the sense of, instead of judging that person to be, oh, they're just, this is how they are, they're going to tell me what to do, I know what they're going to say. There is some truth to that. Yet, when we get really clear on ourselves, it can change the dynamic.
Mhm.
So what we do is we figure out what are our own values, what do we really want in this relationship. And this can be across the board. It doesn't have to be just with family, but we're going to say with family that my parents treated me this way. They always treated me, they wanted me to be a lawyer and I didn't want to be, and I fought them. I wanted to be an artist, and there's this bad blood between us kind of thing. And it's like, well, have we been able to take the time to explain
Mhm.
why it was important to us? Because sometimes the family doesn't listen. They want the best for us. This
Right.
is one of the scenarios. They want the best for us and they think they know everything. They think they do. So when it comes to us, understanding, where are your boundaries being crossed? So where are you getting angry or frustrated? Because anger and frustration are there, it's information. It
Yeah.
tells us where our boundary has been crossed. It's not a bad thing. Anger and frustration doesn't have to be bad, and we don't have to use it as a barrier. We
Right.
can use it for ourselves as information. Okay, if my mother is constantly calling me all the time and interrupting and wanting, what are you doing? How are you? Because she's very needy. Okay, then and it frustrates us. That gives us the information. The second thing about this is that we get to know, we know what we want. I want a more healthy relationship with this parent or this sibling. Second is to be able to go, okay, where is it that, where are they trying to control me? Where do I feel controlled? But really, what are the symptoms? What are you experiencing? And what is the opposite of what you want to experience? We have to get clear on self awareness to set a boundary,
Yeah.
right? We have to know what's
Yeah.
important to us and what's not important to us. We have to know these things. It's like, okay, and treat the family that way because, I have mixed feelings about blood is thicker than water too, because who said that? And
Well, yeah.
sometimes
It's not, right? Sometimes it's just not.
sometimes it's not. And what I share with clients a lot of times is if you have gotten clear on what kind of a relationship you want to have and you have done your best to come forward in knowing that, because it's getting through to our thinking. We have to heal ourselves because we can have wounded parts of ourselves from childhood
Yeah.
that we are meant to get in touch with. We are meant to be able to embody
Yep.
that and reparent ourselves from. Then we can go back and show up stronger and more empowered and say, this is how I'd like the relationship to be.
Right. Right.
And be open to hearing both sides. But the boundary is this, is like if they aren't open to hearing, and sometimes they are not, a lot of times they are not, then you have to be willing to walk away.
Yeah, or set the boundary and just stay kind in the boundary, right? Like I feel like sometimes, a boundary is set, I go or the person goes, I'm setting this boundary because this all happened, and so now I'm setting this
Mhm.
boundary. And it's a hard boundary, and there's some aggression in there, and there's some, staunchiness, and there's some this is the boundary. And often and sometimes I've experienced that if I just it kind of goes back to what we were talking about once before, where I'm practicing and playing the game. But
Right.
sometimes if I just set the boundary in my head kindly and softly, and when that boundary starts to be pushed or encroached upon, rather than attacking and jumping, saying, boundary
Yeah.
alert, right?
Mhm.
I just kind of go, okay. And then either remove myself from the situation kindly or softly, or just because how do we teach, right? I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm in forgiveness. I'm healing. I'm working on myself. So Kool-Aid consumed. Said with love, not in a way. So maybe a new thought process later. But how do you have these discussions with family members when they're not there in that place of self-discovery or healing, right? They're not in a place of, they're like boundary smoundry, whatever with your, up with people's self. Why don't you go do that someplace else? This is how it's always been done. So how do we set those boundaries with them not even maybe knowing, or with people who don't have the wherewithal or desire to want to play in that arena?
So this is where I'm going to take it back. This is where we have to know. Okay, we're doing the inner work, we're doing the forgiveness work, we're doing the work. We know how we want. We have an idea of how we want this relationship to go, and we have to let go of the outcome.
Yeah.
We cannot be attached to how this other person wants it. Yes, it is sad when they don't, but the only other way that we can do it is to be clear. One, understand your values and really embody that. So, inside that, whether it's family or not, I'm not letting you cross this boundary. And this is in love. It's in kindness. It's in compassion. It's not,
That.
it's not, don't screw with me. Cause I've done that. You've done that. I've gone from no boundaries to nobody's going to treat me this way. Right. And then
No boundaries to all boundaries.
all boundaries. And it was like, oh, that didn't work so well.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, ooh, how do I get down here? Well, this is where we learn to like, okay, what is really super important to me? What is it that I want? What is this relationship? Is it a give and take relationship? Do I, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes with family, we do understand where they are. And that what you said earlier, it's like, what if they're this way? And it's like, you can ask for what you would like. And then without attachment, you hear what they have to say and why.
Right.
Because a
Right.
lot of times there's trauma, there's different things in here. So we hear what they have to say. And then we can go, okay, how does that resonate for me? And then we can step away. You don't make any decisions. Then you step away and you decide, is that what I want? How can I work with this in a way? So for instance, I had a client who with a mother that was really pushy, and she was blaming, and she just wouldn't listen. And my client doing the inner work, she's like, I want a relationship with my mother, but I need to have these boundaries. So how, what are those? And so creating the boundaries, like, okay, I'm only going to talk to her once a week. I'm going to call her. I am going to visit with her, every couple weeks. When she says, you never do this, you never do that, I kindly correct her. Mother,
Mhm.
yes, I did. I said this, and I talked to you last, and I brought you this, and I did that kindly. And then, because when we come forward with this energy, a lot of times in these, like conflict resolution talks about it, when we come across with this calm, I'm not going to get riled up, because before we used to get riled up and brought into the drama. When I come with a calmness, it can also help diffuse.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because when it comes to family, there is a lot of those emotions we've got. So when we
Mm.
work on ourselves, when we work on, like I said earlier, those parts of us that have been hurt or wounded, or we feel, or we didn't get the attention, because a
Right.
lot of times our families shift and change over time. Our parents aren't the same parents they were before,
That's right.
right? And so really learning, where am I at right now, where are they at right now, and be willing to listen and hear, be willing to know what is important to you and what's not, because that's how I know which boundary I don't want to be taken advantage of, and where I'm willing to go, okay, in this case, I can show up. It may not be the relationship that I 100% want, but I do want some relationship with this person.
Right.
So I am not going to let them talk to me a certain way, because there are certain answers, there's certain scripts that I give clients that we can say back to people. It's like, but for me, as a recovering people pleaser, being able to go, that doesn't sit well with me. Let me think about that. Or, I really don't appreciate it when you talk to me that way. So can we find a different way that we can have a conversation to where you don't feel attacked, I don't feel attacked? See, there's a
Yeah.
way that we can do this.
Well, and I've said things before when I was in my good place, like it's hard for me to hear you when you speak to me in that way. It's
Yeah.
hard for me to process what you're saying to me when you talk to me that way. So I need your help here. I mean, I'm being a little bit frivolous with it, but
Right.
it's also like I go, if you can just either give me a second to like think about this, and or if you could shift your tone with me, or if you could try to say it a different way, maybe we can get to the same place. But that opens a dialogue, and that's terrifying.
It is terrifying, but I like, when we can come back and say, I can't hear you when it talks to me that way, or I feel like, we all have learned in communication, you're not accusing, you're saying, and I like what you said, help me understand here, right? Because, a lot of, another phrase people use is, wait, I'm a little confused at what's happening here, right? But
Right.
the words are, can you help me understand? When it's
Yeah.
when it's not done in a sarcastic way, because I've had that happen to me before,
Right.
right?
That blows it all out of the water. That's
It does, because you can feel it. But it's like, "Can you help me understand, because I would really like us to be able to have this conversation." And I
yeah.
love that. I love what you said. And so all of these little tidbits are ways that we set boundaries for ourselves,
Yeah.
and we set boundaries with others, especially with family, and that we do not, it's not it's not black or white.
Right.
Relationships are never black or white. And what we get to do is, and we don't have to, those people that like shove somebody away really quickly,
Yeah.
well, that's our work. If we're
Right.
shoving people away, we have a fear.
You think? No.
Yeah, exactly. We have a fear.
And it's funny because, and I know we'll wrap this up here,
Yeah.
but I would be interested maybe even next time to talk a little bit about, because something as we're dialoguing through this, something that's coming up for me is, okay, that I mean, I'm finding some tools in what we're saying and what you're saying, and some more clarity and in other ways that I can kind of handle setting boundaries with family members who have hurt me. But what if I'm the person who did the hurting? and I'm now doing my work, and I'm now, trying to set my own new boundaries, because oftentimes when I've hurt somebody,
Yeah.
it's because I was either trying to set a boundary or didn't understand that, or was unconscious to the life I was living. And now that I'm doing work, how do I be that person, right? That would be an interesting conversation maybe for
Yes.
next time. How am I the person that did the hurting, but
Yeah.
am to this person, but now to my family, but I'm now doing work? How do I forgive them and myself and
Mm.
find a pathway to healing in that family dynamic when they're the ones doing the pushing away because I'm the one who did the hurting? Just
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes. All right. We will talk about this next time because I love that. And that way we can go into more depth on it. And
yeah.
You know, for you listening, thank you so much. And we would love to have you be a part of the conversation. And so if you could comment below, we'd really appreciate it because I want to know how you feel about boundaries, how you feel about setting boundaries with family or not. What is your experience so that we can dive more into what really matters to you? And so please leave a comment or even send a DM on what you feel, that what are your feelings around boundaries and what has your experience been and what do you want to know more of? We would love to know. And Kim, thank you so much. Oh,
Thank you. I love these conversations, and like I said, I think everybody on the planet should be having one-on-ones with you. So whatever I can do to help support that, I'm in.
oh, thank you so much. And everybody have a really good day.